Welcome back to Life Science Live, everybody. Today we are talking about lichens. Now, lichens are really, really cool. You may have never heard of them, but you've definitely seen them, okay? So lichens are a type of symbiotic relationship between two species, okay? So symbiotic means that they both benefit from it, right? So we have fungus and algae or cyanobacteria. And hello, Jeff, welcome back. We're talking about lichens today. So we have, like I said, we've got a fungus and we have an algae or a cyanobacteria. Now, normally, these guys, funguses function a little bit differently, and the cyanobacteria function a little bit differently, but together, they function really well at the same time. So, basically, what happens is that normally a fungus feeds off of decomposing material. It has they're like roots, but they're not quite the same. They're called mycelium, or mycellae is the multiple for that. So those little roots, they're like hairs, they go into the decomposing structure and they pull the nutrients out of it. It helps to hold them in place. So it's not like a root really at all. Whereas a root will pull up water and things like that. These are more of holding them in place and helping break down in the decomposition process. So there's that. And then cyanobacteria on its own is usually a single cell organism. They'll group together in large groups, like with algae, you'll find like big groupings of pond scum, but in general, they don't really work in groups. So lichens are really, really cool because the lichen gets to benefit from the algae in that it doesn't have to decompose the thing that it is attached to, because algae can photosynthesize. Fungi cannot photosynthesize because algae or plants photosynthesize and a couple of other things. Fungi do not photosynthesize. So we've got fungi over here. They can't take sunlight and turn it into sugars. So the cyanobacteria, which is a type of bacteria, and the algae, they can photosynthesize. And so they can turn the sunlight into sugar, into energy that they can actually use. The fungus benefits from this because it then is able to take the sugars that the cyanobacteria creates and use it itself. Now, that would not be a great relationship if the fungus didn't give something back to the cyanobacteria, right? So what it is that, like I said, they don't come in very large groups. They're usually very, very small groupings, these specific species of cyanobacteria. They don't come in large groups because they just can't survive that way, unless they're protected by the fungus. So the structure of a lichen is it's sitting on something. So this is the substrate. It might be a rock, it might be a tree, it might be concrete, it can be all kinds of things. So here's the substrate, right? And then the mycelium, they connect to this. So there's a layer of fungus on top. And then on top of that layer of fungus is the cyanobacteria. And then on top of that is another layer of fungus. So we don't see the bacteria really. We do see the fungus though. So pretty much everything about a lichen that we understand and can see is the fungus. And that's how we classify them as well, as we named them based on the fungus that is present. I have one here on one of our log sections that we use to talk about trees. We've got some lichen there. So like I said, if you don't know, if you've never heard the word lichen, you've probably almost certainly seen it. It's that greenish brown stuff, or sometimes red or orange stuff, that you see on trees, on rocks, on concrete. It could be a lichen. Ugh. It's also, by the way, it's spelled L-I-C-H-E-N. So you can go look it up. You might see it and think, oh, it's lichen. It is lichen. So if you see that word, you now know how to pronounce it. But basically, that's what you're looking for. You can find them all over the place. This is just one or two types of lichens right here. It might be two because we can see this kind of orangey color and this kind of yellow color right there. Could be two types of lichens. Now what's cool is even here on BYU campus, you can find a lot of different lichens. So there's actually, you can go onto the BYU Lichens Lab. You can Google that, go onto their Instagram. They have a BYU Lichen Tour, where it's a self-guided tour, a little walk around campus just to see lots of different kinds of lichens. So even here, we can find so many different species of lichens. There are, as discovered right now, 17,000 species. And there's so many more that have yet to be discovered. Again, even here on BYU campus, there's some that have yet to be identified, which is so cool. So if you really want to go into science and you want to be the kind of person that gets to name a species, go into lichenology. You'll be able to see some really cool new things. Now let's talk about what lichens look like. I said a little bit about color. They can be orange, red, green, brown, yellow, black, white. So they come in a wide range of colors, right? And it just depends on what fungus is the outer layer of this lichen. Will depend on what color it is. It also will decide what the structure looks like. So there's a bunch of different structures. If you go on the BYU Lichen Tour, I have them written down right here, so give me 1 second, make sure I get all of them, because there's 8. If you go on the Lichen Tour, you'll be able to see 4 of the 8 types, which is pretty cool. So there is Fruticos, which is like kind of bushy or shrubby. It almost looks like little leaf, like squished leaves that are kind of all stacked together. So that is Fruticos. You can remember because it sounds like fruit, and fruit grows on trees. There is Folios. The Fruticos is more like shrubby, and then the Folios is the leafy one. My bad. So that one's more like foliage and leaves. That's how I remember it. Let's see, just says, can lichens be decomposing animal species or only plant type species? So they're actually not even quite decomposing anything. Normally a fungus would be to get energy. It has to decompose things, break it down to unleash the nutrients that it would need. But it gets all of its nutrients from the cyanobacteria or algae that is like inside of the structure. So it gets all of its nutrients from photosynthesis, which is really, really cool. Which means that they usually just stick onto things that are very, usually kind of rough, like a rock or a tree. They also can be found all over the world. You can find them in really, really cold climates because these funguses are really good at growing and they don't need a lot of nutrients. They don't need to break things down in the decomposition process. They can live in extreme cold as long as there's still sunlight for the cyanobacteria to photosynthesize. Pretty neat. Okay, let's go back to the different shapes of lichen. So I can pull up some pictures. This is a Fruticos lichen. So it's kind of got little branches on it, and it's like the branches of a fruit tree, a Fruticos. Then we have the Folios. This one almost looks like little plates. That one's kind of harder to see. You see that? It's like little leaves. And then we have Crustos, which is exactly what it sounds like. It's like a little crust. I think that this one on this tree here is likely Crustos. So you can see, just nice and crusty looking. So when it kind of just sits flat on it, it could be a Crustos lichen. Then there is Scaly Lichens that are squamulos, and all 4 of those types of lichens, all of those forms, they're called growth forms. It's just how they look on the outside, how they shape. Those 4 forms you'll be able to see if you walk around on BYU campus. You'll be able to see for sure all 4 of those forms, which is pretty cool. But they have a couple other forms. There's stringy ones, which are filamentous. There is wispy ones, which are called bisoid. There's powdery ones called leprous. And then there's even ones that are just structureless and they're gelatinous. So lichens are really, really cool. They come in so many different species. There's so many that you can find. And since they come in so many different structures, you can find them pretty much on any substrate if you're looking in the right place. So if you go outside, make sure to look for these lichens. The only thing that I will say is don't pick off the lichens, okay? Because lichens take a really long time to grow, especially in really cold areas, or really ones that are really arid, so really dry, or ones that are really high up. So if it's harder to live there, they grow really slowly. If you see one the size of like a dinner plate, it's been growing for years and years and years and years. So if you see lichens, you can take pictures, you can get a magnifying glass and look up close to see their super cool structures. You can even just pull up your phone and zoom in really close on them. That'll help you look at them up close. But other than that, don't pick them off because they can be, they're really fragile. All right, Jeff says, can lichens be toxic? That's a great question. I don't know of any specific species that are toxic, but I imagine that they very well could be because, or especially specifically to humans, because certain funguses are, as well as certain bacteria, cyanobacteria specifically. So they absolutely could be, but also there are some animals that eat them as part of their diet. So reindeer, for example, will actually eat a specific kind of lichen called reindeer lichen, and they will eat a lot of this lichen because it grows so well up in the snowy north where it's really cold and the reindeer live. They do a really good job of growing there, and so the reindeer just like to eat them. So can they be toxic? Probably. There's probably at least a couple, but for sure there's some that aren't toxic to all different species. Pretty cool. Okay, now something else that's kind of cool when you're looking for lichens, they might just be little splotches like the tree ring that I showed you. It might just have little tiny like clumps of things. It might be like a little, like the branchy one, it might be like a little bush looking thing, but it also could be like a ring. So sometimes they'll form like a circle, sometimes they'll form a ring, they'll form natural shapes, which is really cool. So just keep your eyes out. Feel free to share what lichens you find around out in the woods, even on BYU campus. If you find anything you're like, is this a lichen? Send it to the BYU Bean Museum. We'll take a look at it. We'll let you know what kind of lichen it is maybe. We have an herbarium here at the Bean Museum that studies lichens. So we're still learning so much about lichens, even right here on BYU campus. So let us know if you find anything cool, guys. Let us know if you go on the BYU Lichen walking tour. But otherwise, that is all for Life Science Live today. Thank you guys so much for tuning in, and I hope you have an excellent weekend. Ta-ta.